Yes, I want to be sheriff. I mean, that's what I want to be. I don't want to have wear a chef's hat.
Hello, this is the story of Alabama sheriffs and public jails, where inmates were starved so that the sheriffs could take the taxpayer money intended to feed prisoners and keep it as personal profit. All legally. This is the story of Sheriff Corndog and Sheriff Beachhouse. The state of Alabama passed a law in 1939 which provided sheriffs with $1.75 per prisoner per day to cover the cost of feeding them. If sheriffs could feed their prisoners for less than that, the law allowed them to keep any leftover money as personal income, while also requiring them to cover any shortfalls. This was taxpayer money distributed by federal, state, and local governments to feed prisoners, and it remained $1.75 for the next 80 years. Keep in mind that these jails aren't just for people convicted of a crime. They also hold people who have been accused of a crime but have not been convicted and are awaiting court, in addition to insane persons who are awaiting transfer to mental hospitals. While this practice of sheriffs keeping prisoner food money had been going on since 1939, it came to public attention beginning in the early 2000s, with several high-profile court cases. In 2001, Morgan County, Alabama, Sheriff Steve Crabb was served with a class action lawsuit over the abhorrent conditions at his jail. The suit ended with a consent decree, an agreement between both sides without admission of liability, which required the county to improve the conditions and feed inmates a nutritionally adequate diet. In 2003, former police lieutenant Greg Bartlett was elected sheriff of Morgan County. 5 years later, in 2008, the conditions in the jail had not improved, violating the consent decree, so the case returned to federal court, this time with Bartlett in the spotlight and facing contempt charges. The court found that the food served to inmates was indeed inadequate. A typical breakfast was a serving of grits, a slice of white bread, and half an egg or less, served with tea or a sugary drink like Kool-Aid. Lunch was 2 peanut butter or bologna sandwiches with a very small amount of peanut butter or bologna, a small bag of corn chips, and flavoured water or tea. Dinner was 2 hot dogs or meat patties, or chicken livers or chicken quarters, 1 slice of bread, slaw or onions, and mixed vegetables or baked beans. Inmates were never served milk and received fruit only 3 or 4 times per year. They received insufficient portions and suffered recurring hunger pangs and dramatic weight loss. Most prisoners, if they could, would get money from family and friends to buy junk food at the for-profit jail store, with some reportedly spending hundreds of dollars each month. Bartlett was serving his prisoners as little food as possible, as cheaply as possible, even getting free food donated by local schools, and keeping the leftover jail food money, $212,000 over 3 years, more than his salary, which was $64,000 per year, or about $100,000 in today's money. Keep in mind this is in Alabama, a state with one of the lowest costs of living in the country.
Hi everyone, this is Javier Rodriguez from Premium Corn Dogs. I bring to you guys the beef ones. The beef. You guys are gonna fucking love these.
It was found that in 2007, Bartlett's prisoners ate corn dogs for every meal for weeks. Some articles say 2 times a day, some say 3. Court documents just say every meal. Corn dogs are not exactly nutritious, but they're not exactly cheap either. Not compared to making fresh food with free prison labour. So, why corn dogs? Well, a trucker who was hauling a trailer of corn dogs decided to quit his job and broke into the sealed shipment to take some corn dogs with him, a self-applied severance of corn dogs. Because of this, the vendor who ordered the shipment refused to accept it, so the trucking company offered to give the corn dogs away for free to anyone willing to pay for transporting them. Sheriff Bartlett and another sheriff, Mike Blakely of Limestone County, agreed to split the $1,000 cost of transporting the corn dogs to their respective jails. Blakely later told a local paper that his half of the corn dogs lasted about 8 months. But Sheriff Bartlett fed them to his prisoners at every single meal until they were gone, prompting the judge to coin the nickname Sheriff Corndog. I suppose the nickname Sheriff Battered Offal Tube was too on the nose.
Probably the first 32 years that I was sheriff, I probably would have done it without even getting a paycheck because I've had so much fun and enjoyed serving the people of Limestone County.
In 2009, Bartlett was found in contempt of court, spent a single night in jail, we've no idea what he ate, and signed an agreement to stop taking the jail food money. He was never charged with a crime because what he did was legal. His only real punishment was losing his bid for re-election. He withdrew from the public eye, and there's no word on where he is now. Maybe he's at Disneyland. Maybe he's in the room with us right now. And yes, we are in the same room together. So that was the end of it. They changed the law, right? Padme? Wrong. In 2015, Bartlett's successor, Sheriff Anna Franklin, took $150,000 from the jail food fund and, at the suggestion of her cop boyfriend, invested it in a used car lot called Priceville Partners, which was co-owned by a convicted felon, Greg Steenson, who sold stolen cars and operated a Ponzi scheme. This only came out when Priceville filed for bankruptcy. All 3 parties were arrested, and Sheriff Franklin pled guilty to a charge of failing to file a tax return. She got 2 years of probation and 300 hours of community service. Franklin didn't get a nickname from a judge, but I think Sheriff Used Car Lot has a nice ring to it.
No indictment, no charges were filed, and I'm not convicted of any of those things.
Was that the end of this practice? No. In January of 2018, 2 advocacy groups, the Southern Center for Human Rights and the Alabama Appleseed Center for Law and Justice, filed a lawsuit against 49 Alabama sheriffs. Not quite all of them, but the majority of the 67 sheriffs in Alabama, as they refused to comply with public record requests regarding their prisoner food accounts, despite their compliance being mandatory. The centers had frequently received letters from inmates reporting that they weren't fed enough and were served food that was spoiled or contaminated with rodent feces and foreign objects. The center wanted to find out whether these sheriffs were personally pocketing money meant for feeding prisoners, and if so, how much. They also contended that it was not legal for sheriffs to keep the food money, and that their interpretation of the 1939 state law was incorrect. One of the sheriffs targeted in the lawsuit was Etowah County Sheriff Todd Entrekin, who had a salary of over $93,000 per year. It soon came out that from 2015 to 2017, Entrekin kept $750,000 of prisoner food money as personal income. He and his wife, Karen Entrekin, once a probation officer, bought an orange 4-bedroom beach house with an in-ground pool for $740,000. It was just one of several properties they owned, with a combined value of $1.7 million. The press dubbed him the Beach House Sheriff.
Money from the inmate food account is being used to prop up some lavish lifestyle. Anybody that gets out here and works every day, and at the end of the day, if you make a profit, it's yours. Again, it's the law. Haven't done anything wrong. If it's wrong, somebody needs to change the law. Bought a lot of stuff down there when prices was low, and after the oil spill, and flipped some houses and done some good. I'm not going to apologize for that.
In February of 2018, the largest digital news website in Alabama, AL.com, began reporting on the lawsuit. In their first article, they spoke to a 20-year-old man named Matthew Qualls, who had been paid to mow the lawn at one of Sheriff Entrekin's houses and the house of his parents. Qualls said that he questioned why the checks used to pay him were marked food provision account, when he personally knew inmates in the jail who had gone without food. 4 days after criticizing the sheriff, Qualls was arrested on drugs charges based on an anonymous tip reporting the smell of marijuana at an apartment where he was staying. Local police found 2.4 pounds, about a kilogram, of marijuana butter that Qualls and his friends were making, using 14 grams of marijuana and 5 cups of butter. Police Captain John Bryant told AL.com his department wanted to charge Qualls with marijuana possession based on the amount of the drug used to make the butter, which was the standard way of doing it. But the Etowah County Drug Enforcement Unit decided to charge him with trafficking because they included the weight of the butter added to the mixture. A deputy commander of the Drug Enforcement Unit told AL.com, "Once that marijuana was mixed with the butter, then the whole butter becomes marijuana, and that's what we weighed." So, pro tip to all you disgusting potheads out there, if you've only got half an ounce of weed but you have 10 pounds of butter, mix them together, you got 10 pounds of weed. Midas move over, we found the infinite weed glitch. Price is going to come right down. With a charge of drug trafficking rather than possession, Qualls faced a mandatory minimum sentence of 3 years in prison and up to life in prison. He took a plea deal for possession and as a first-time offender managed to avoid prison and go to a county drug program instead. AL.com also spoke to former inmates at the Etowah County Jail who had worked in the kitchen and said it was common to serve rotten or expired food. They served chicken covered in tumours that the workers tried their best to cut off, generally stuff that couldn't be sold. Once, they received food recovered from a train wreck. Packages of an unknown meat product served to prisoners were marked as not fit for human consumption. One former inmate suspected it was dog food. They also said the jail took a big truck to a church food bank twice per month to pick up donated food for free. The church confirmed that this was true. The kitchen workers also said that the facility received a heads up from the health department several days before inspections, so they always passed.
Eat what you're served, and you will eat a balanced, nutritious meal. Well, we've learned a lot over the years, over 10 years. We've learned how to feed a balanced diet. We've learned how to feed a nutritious diet. We've learned how to buy food better, larger quantities from different locations.
Entrekin received campaign contributions for his re-election from, among others, a company that provides inmate telecom services, the bank that secured a mortgage on one of his houses, and a car dealership contracted to provide a vehicle for his office. Despite this, he lost his primary bid for re-election in June of 2018. He faced no repercussions for his actions in taking the money, as an investigation determined he had not broken the law. The same year, he was also accused of having sex with an underage girl back in 1992. No charges were pressed in that case either, and Entrekin sued AL.com and others for defamation for reporting on this story. AL.com maintained that their reporting was accurate. I can't find any updates on the suit, suggesting that it's ongoing. In late 2018, it was reported that Entrekin had actually pocketed more money than previously thought. he had made an additional $1.5 million in personal profit from housing federal immigration detainees. The jail received $3 million for housing them, and he kept half of it. From what I can tell, he has retired, having kept all of his taxpayer money without penalty. And that still wasn't the end of it. In 2019, David Abston, who served as Pickens County Sheriff for over 30 years, pled guilty to wire fraud and tax evasion for defrauding a food bank and his own church, in a scheme to keep $400,000 of prisoner food money. He got 18 months in jail. The good news is, with the public attention brought to this issue by the press and advocacy groups, things finally took a turn for the better in 2019, when Alabama Governor Kay Ivey signed a bill finally ending the practice of sheriffs keeping jail food money as personal income. The money must now be paid into a public account rather than directly to a sheriff's personal bank account. If there's any money left over each year, 75% of it must remain in these public accounts, but 25% of it can be used for other law enforcement purposes, like new equipment. And the daily food allowance for prisoners was increased from $1.75 to $2.25. However, there were reports in 2021 of continued problems with feeding inmates in Alabama, with several telling AL.com that in Morgan County they are still fed an insufficient amount of poor quality food, with inmates suffering from drastic weight loss and food poisoning, and relying on family members sending them money to buy food from the jail commissary. The law has been changed, which is a good thing, but this practice of sheriffs keeping prisoner food money went on for almost 80 years, and we will probably never know exactly how much taxpayer money was pilfered in Alabama during that time. A positive way of looking at this, if you can bear such an indulgence, is that this all does show that advocacy groups and investigative reporting can elicit meaningful change. AL.com and especially investigative reporter Connor Sheets, who now works for LA Times, meticulously covered all of this, and without them, this practice would surely be going on still. So good for them. It seems obvious that this law is ripe for abuse, so much so that I really kind of think that it was intended that way. Systemic corruption? Crikey. Thanks very much for joining me. You can support me on Patreon, where you can get these videos about a week early, and there's also some exclusive stuff going up on Patreon too, if you're feeling flush. Thanks for watching, regardless of whether you support me on Patreon or not. It's not all about money. Likes and subscribes too. Blah blah blah. Thanks very much. Bye bye.